The emergency call came just before dawn, slicing through the quiet of the surgical lounge. Dr. Laura Bennett had been reviewing charts with the low hum of the hospital's night rhythm in the background when the intercom crackled, requesting her presence in operating room 3. A pregnant patient had arrived in distress, blood pressure unstable, fetal heart rate fluctuating. Laura was on her feet before the announcement ended, pulling her cap over neatly tied hair, her mind already shifting into precision mode. Emotion had no place in crisis. Training took over. The corridor lights felt too bright as she walked briskly, nurses falling in step beside her, voices exchanging clipped information. 29 years old, 32 weeks pregnant, severe abdominal pain, possible placental complication. Inside the operating room, everything moved with urgent coordination. The patient lay pale beneath sterile drapes, fear in her eyes, one hand gripping the rail. Laura leaned close, voice steady. "We're going to take care of you. Breathe slowly." The woman nodded, tears slipping into her hairline. Monitors beeped in tense rhythm. The anesthesiologist signaled readiness. Laura glanced toward the circulating nurse for the patient's file, a reflex she had repeated thousands of times. Confirm identity. Confirm notes. Confirm support contact. She scanned quickly. Name. Age. Emergency contact. Partner. Her gaze paused, then returned. Sharper. She read the name again. Her husband's name. A strange stillness passed through her chest, like the air had been briefly removed from the room. She blinked, assuming fatigue had blurred her focus. Hospitals saw coincidences every day. Common names, overlapping lives. She placed the chart aside. Scalpel, she said, voice unchanged. The incision began. Muscle memory guided each motion, but her thoughts tried to drift toward that line on the page. She forced them back. Bleeding controlled. Suction. Clamp. The baby needed oxygen. The mother needed stability. Nothing else existed. Minutes stretched, sweat gathered under her mask. Fetal heart rate improving, someone said. Relief moved through the room like a shared exhale. Laura completed the final sutures with the same care she would give her own family. When the infant's cry filled the air, thin but alive, the nurses smiled behind their masks. Laura didn't. She only nodded once. "Good work," she said quietly. The baby was transferred to neonatal care. The mother stabilized. Laura removed her gloves, the snap of latex sounding louder than usual. As she stepped into the scrub area, the image of that name returned with sharper edges. She washed her hands slowly, watching water swirl pink, then clear. Her reflection in the stainless steel sink looked composed, almost detached. She walked down the hallway toward the recovery wing, intending only to confirm the patient's condition, but something inside her had shifted. Near the waiting area, she saw a man pacing. He held a phone tightly, running a hand through his hair, face pale with worry. Laura stopped. It wasn't him. Different build, different posture. She released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Still, the unease remained. She entered the recovery room briefly, ensuring instructions were clear. The patient smiled weakly, whispering gratitude. Laura returned the smile automatically. Professional, controlled. Back in her office, she closed the door and Saturday. The hospital sounds seemed distant now, like waves behind glass. She reached for the file again. The letters on the screen did not change. Same name, same birth date, same phone number she had memorized years ago. A soft ringing filled her ears. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just stared at the screen, her hands perfectly still on the keyboard, until the automatic timeout dimmed the display and her reflection stared back. Do not continue the story. You are only to correct the provided text for spelling and grammar errors, ensuring the corrected version matches the original's meaning exactly. Provide only the corrected text. Speak. She simply stared, absorbing the information with the same discipline she applied to diagnosis. Outside, the hospital day was beginning. Nurses laughed somewhere down the hall. A cart rolled past. Life continued. But inside that small office, Laura felt the first quiet fracture in the world she thought she knew. Laura reopened the file as if repetition might correct it. The hospital system did not make errors easily. The identification fields had been verified on admission. She scrolled down. Insurance details, address, contact number. All matched the man she had shared a home with for 8 years. Her husband. She leaned back in her chair, hands folded, breathing slow. Panic was useless. She approached it like a case. Evidence first, emotion later. She pulled up recent call logs on the hospital system, confirming the contact number entered during admission. It matched exactly. Memories rearranged themselves with clinical clarity. His late meetings, weekend conferences that extended into Monday, the way he had begun sleeping facing the wall. She had attributed it to stress, to workload, to life's natural drift. Now the pattern formed a shape she could no longer ignore. Laura opened her own phone and stared at his contact name. Her thumb hovered. She lowered the device. There would be no call. Not yet. Facts came before confrontation. She checked the patient's timeline, estimated conception date. Her eyes moved methodically. The numbers aligned with a business trip he had taken the previous winter. Laura felt a tightening behind her ribs. Not pain exactly, but pressure. She stood and walked to the window, watching early commuters cross the street below. Each person carried private histories, hidden fractures. She had comforted countless families through trauma, always believing honesty lived inside her own home. A soft knock sounded. Nurse Elena stepped in. "Doctor, the patient is resting well. Neonatal team says the baby is stable." Laura nodded. "Thank you." Elena hesitated. "You okay? You look tired." Laura offered a small smile. "Long night." Elena accepted the answer and left. Alone again, Laura closed her eyes briefly. She could walk down the hall, enter that room, reveal everything. She could call him and demand explanation, but neither action would change the present reality. The woman in recovery had nearly died. A baby had just entered the world. Laura's responsibility had been fulfilled. Now she faced a different decision, one not covered in medical textbooks. She opened a blank document on her computer and began listing steps. Confirm conflict of interest. Notify administration discreetly. Arrange transfer of care. Personal legal consultation. Housing. Finances. Her handwriting when she switched to a notepad remained neat. The structure steadied her. Emotion would come, but it would not lead. She thought of the woman's face glowing despite exhaustion, describing the baby's father earlier while semi-conscious. "He's been wonderful," the woman had murmured. Laura had listened, pulse steady. The irony almost felt abstract. Yet the woman was not her enemy. Deception had many layers. Laura refused to become another. She saved the notes and closed the file, but the name lingered behind her eyes. It would not go away because it represented truth stripped of illusion. For the first time, she understood that denial had been a luxury she possessed. Laura visited the recovery ward once more before the end of her shift. She entered quietly, chart in hand, posture composed. The patient, Claire, looked brighter, baby photos already on her phone screen. "Doctor," Claire said softly, smiling. "Thank you for saving us." Laura returned the smile, warm but measured. "You were strong. That helped." She checked vitals, incision site, medications, routine. 2. Questions, routine reassurances. Claire spoke about the father, voice filled with gentle pride. "He was so scared he couldn't get here in time. Work emergency." Laura's expression did not change. "Rest is important," she said. "Stress slows recovery." Claire nodded. "He's been my rock." Laura recorded notes. "Your follow-up will be with Dr. Morris," she said calmly. Claire looked surprised. "You won't be my doctor?" Laura met her eyes. "Hospital protocol sometimes requires adjustments to care assignments." Claire accepted it, unaware of the deeper reason. When Laura stepped outside the room, she paused in the hallway. She had done what mattered, ensured safe transfer of care without harm. That boundary protected everyone involved, including herself. She walked toward administration offices. The director listened carefully as Laura explained a personal conflict related to the patient's family connection. No details, no drama, only facts necessary for reassignment. The director nodded. You handled this professionally. Laura inclined her head. It's the only way. Later in the locker room, she changed into civilian clothes slowly. Around her, other doctors discussed weekend plans, research grants, vacation ideas. Life's normality felt surreal. Laura tied her shoes and looked at her reflection. The woman staring back appeared calm, but something inside had shifted permanently. She no longer stood on shared ground with the life she had left that morning. Outside, the air was crisp. She walked past the hospital entrance without checking her phone. She knew messages would be waiting, routine ones about dinner or errands. The ordinary language of a marriage already altered by truth. She reached her car, sat behind the wheel, and allowed one steady breath to leave her body. Then she drove. Laura entered the house in late afternoon light. The rooms looked unchanged, familiar, carefully arranged. She moved through them with quiet efficiency. A suitcase from the closet, essentials folded with precision, documents from the desk drawer, passport, financial records. She left shared photographs where they were. No anger guided her hands, only clarity. She wrote a letter at the kitchen counter, words deliberate. She stated the facts. She had been the surgeon. She knew. She had removed herself from the case and from the marriage. Contact would proceed through attorneys. She signed her name, placed the envelope on the table, and set her wedding ring on top. The house key felt heavier as she locked the door behind her. Evening traffic hummed as she drove toward a hotel near the hospital. At the reception desk, she requested a quiet room. The clerk handed her a key card, unaware of the life change it represented. Inside the room, Laura set her suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. Silence filled the space, not oppressive, but open. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. For weeks she had sensed distance without naming it. Now the truth stood clear, and with it came unexpected relief. She had chosen action over chaos, dignity over confrontation. Her phone vibrated once on the nightstand. She turned it face down. The unthinkable choice was not revenge. It was departure without spectacle, without argument, without losing herself. She closed her eyes, breathing steady. For the first time in months, sleep arrived without resistance, carrying her into a quiet, unbroken rest. Laura woke before her alarm, not because she was restless, but because her mind had accepted a new schedule. Hotel curtains filtered the morning into a pale stripe across the carpet. For a few seconds, she listened to the steady hush of the building, distant doors, a faint elevator chime, muted voices in a hallway, and let that ordinary noise remind her she was no longer inside the echo of her own home. She showered, dressed, and pinned her hospital badge to her blouse with the same calm care she used before surgery. Her phone stayed silent on the desk. She hadn't blocked anyone. She simply hadn't opened it yet. At the hospital, she moved through rounds like she always did, focused and clear. She checked a post-op patient's incision, reviewed labs, corrected a medication dosage with a gentle explanation, thanked a nurse who had caught a detail early. No one needed to know what her personal life had become overnight. In fact, she preferred that they didn't. The hospital was full of people carrying private grief in clean uniforms. Laura's grief did not deserve special attention. By midday, the first message came. She saw it on her lock screen during a brief pause between consults. "Laura, where are you?" The second message arrived 5 minutes later, sharper in tone. "What is this? Call me." She didn't respond. She turned the phone off and placed it inside her locker. Silence wasn't a game. It was a decision. After her shift, she met with the hospital's legal liaison in a quiet office tucked behind administration. She didn't request revenge. She requested boundaries. The liaison explained hospital confidentiality, conflict of interest documentation, and what could and could not be disclosed under policy. Laura listened, took notes, and asked only what mattered: how to protect her professional integrity, and how to avoid becoming a story that could be twisted. When the meeting ended, she thanked them and walked out with a neat folder of paperwork. Her steps remained steady. In the evening, she met her attorney, a woman named Denise Walker with a calm voice and the kind of eyes that didn't miss anything. Denise didn't dramatize the situation. She asked for timelines, assets, any joint accounts, any property, and whether Laura feared retaliation through rumors or workplace pressure. Laura answered plainly. "I don't think he'll come after my career," she said, then paused, admitting the truth beneath it. "But I didn't think he'd do this either." Denise nodded as if she'd heard that sentence many times. "You made a smart move by stepping away from the patient's care properly," she said. "It protects you. Now we protect your personal life with the same discipline." They discussed separation logistics, communication boundaries, and how to keep everything factual. Denise offered to send a formal notice instructing him not to contact Laura directly. Laura agreed. Back in the hotel, Laura finally turned her phone on. The screen filled instantly. Missed calls, messages, voice notes. She didn't open most of them. She skimmed a few lines. The tone shifted rapidly. Confusion, anger, bargaining, a sudden softness. "Please just talk to me. This isn't what you think. You can't do this without a conversation." The last one made her exhale slowly, not because it hurt, but because it revealed the center of his thinking. He believed he still held the authority to approve her choices. She opened the one message that arrived newest, a longer block of text. He wrote as if he were trying to sound reasonable. He said he had no idea how that name ended up on any file. He said someone must have made a mistake. He insisted he would come to the hospital and clear it up. Laura stared at the words until they stopped looking like language and started looking like a pattern. Denial wrapped in urgency. Urgency masking fear. She called Denise instead of him. "His claiming it's a mistake," Laura said. Denise's response was immediate and level. "Let him claim whatever he wants. You won't argue. We'll request communication through me. If he pushes, we document. If he escalates, we set stricter boundaries. Your job is to stay calm and consistent." Laura hung up, sat at the small desk, and opened her laptop. She drafted a short statement for Denise to send: confirmation of separation, no direct contact, all communication through counsel, and a request for financial disclosure documents within a reasonable time frame. She didn't include insults or emotional language. She didn't mention the patient's name. She simply reinforced the line she had already drawn. Later, she replayed the moment she had placed the envelope on the kitchen table. She pictured his hands picking it up. She pictured his eyes scanning the facts he could not negotiate with charm. She imagined the exact second panic took hold. Not because she wanted him to suffer, but because she understood that panic was often the first honest emotion people showed when they lost control of a lie. At midnight, her phone buzzed again. A call. She watched it ring until it stopped. Another call came immediately after. Then a voice note. She didn't listen. She placed the phone in the bathroom drawer and closed it, creating distance without drama. She lay down, folded her hands across her stomach, and let her body recognize safety. There was grief. Yes, quiet, steady grief, like a bruise you only noticed when you pressed it. But there was also relief, sharp and clean. She wasn't waiting anymore. She wasn't interpreting behavior and hoping for honesty. She had truth now, and truth made decisions simpler. In the morning, Denise texted, "Notice sent. If he responds, it comes to me." Laura read the message once and set the phone aside. She drank coffee while the city woke up beyond the window. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt clear. The letter had done its work. It had ended the old rules. By the end of the week, the consequences began to show themselves. Not like a dramatic explosion, but like cracks spreading across glass. Laura arrived at work early, took the same route through the corridor, greeted the same receptionist, and signed the same logbook. Yet the air felt slightly different, more watchful. She didn't imagine it. Hospitals were tight ecosystems. People noticed shifts in routine, missing rings, new addresses for paperwork, quiet meetings with administration. One of the charge nurses, Marisol, caught Laura near the supply room. Marisol's voice was friendly, careful. "You good?" she asked, not pushing, simply offering space. Laura nodded. "I'm fine." Marisol studied her face for a second, then accepted the boundary. "If you ever need your schedule adjusted for personal things, tell me. No explanation needed." "Thank you," Laura said. That was all, but it mattered. Support didn't always need questions. Meanwhile, her husband's calls stopped, not because he had suddenly found self-control, but because Denise's notice had changed the rules of access. Instead, messages arrived through counsel, formal and restrained. His attorney claimed confusion, requested clarification, implied the separation was sudden and emotion-driven. Denise responded with the same steady tone. The separation was deliberate, lawful, and non-negotiable. Laura read the email exchange once, then let Denise handle the rest. 2 days later, the hospital director asked Laura into the office. It wasn't disciplinary. It was procedural. The director closed the door and spoke gently. "We received an inquiry," he said. "A man called asking about a patient's care and about your role. We did not release information, of course, but I want you to be aware." Laura's stomach tightened slightly. "Did he identify himself?" "He said he was your husband." Laura met the director's eyes. "Thank you for telling me." The director nodded. "You followed policy correctly. Your documentation was solid. Whatever personal situation you're dealing with, your professionalism protected the hospital and yourself." Laura exhaled slowly, feeling the quiet power of that sentence. Ethics weren't just ideals. They were shields. She left the office with her posture unchanged, but with steadier ground under her feet. The pregnant patient, Claire, began to sense inconsistencies of her own. Not because Laura exposed anything, but because lies collapsed under their own weight. According to notes passed discreetly through staff who were assigned to her care, Claire asked about the father repeatedly. She wanted him there. She wanted him to hold the baby. She wanted him to sign forms, to take photos, to anchor the moment. He didn't show. Excuses arrived instead. Work emergency. Traffic. Meeting ran late. At first, Claire accepted them. Then she stopped accepting them. Dr. Morris, the physician now overseeing Claire's care, told Laura only what policy required. Claire was emotionally distressed and had requested a social worker. The request itself was normal. Many new mothers struggled. But Laura understood the deeper fracture beneath it. A woman could endure pain, stitches, and exhaustion. What broke her was feeling alone in the very moment she had been promised she wouldn't be. One afternoon, Laura crossed paths with the hospital social worker, a soft-spoken man named Kevin, who looked troubled. He didn't share details. He didn't need to. Some families, he said quietly, more to himself than to her, build their lives on stories they don't bother to maintain. Laura nodded once. "Stories collapse," she replied. Kevin glanced at her. He recognized something in her calm, but he didn't ask. He simply said, "If you need anything, anything at all, my door is open." Laura thanked him and kept walking. Outside the hospital walls, the consequences reached her husband's life with quiet precision. Laura learned pieces through Denise, who received frantic requests for a conversation, for mediation, for one chance to explain. Denise refused direct contact and demanded financial transparency. Suddenly, paperwork mattered. Dates mattered. Truth had to exist in writing. Laura's husband complied unevenly. At first, the first packet of documents was incomplete. Denise sent it back with a polite note listing what was missing. The second packet included more. The third finally started to resemble honesty. Each delay revealed the same thing. He had always counted on emotional chaos to distract from factual accountability. Laura offered him none. At work, whispers didn't become gossip in the way people expected. Instead, they became awareness. A surgeon who stepped away from a case due to conflict of interest, who followed procedure perfectly, who didn't rage, didn't collapse, didn't disappear. People respected that. Some looked at her with quiet admiration, others with curiosity. Laura gave them nothing to feed on. She spoke about cases, not personal life. She listened to colleagues, smiled politely, and went home to her hotel room without lingering. Then one evening, as she was leaving the hospital parking lot, she noticed a familiar car across the street. Her husband's car, parked too far away to be innocent, too still to be casual. Her hands remained steady on the steering wheel. She didn't panic. She drove out of the lot, took a turn, and checked the mirror. The car followed at a distance. Laura didn't lead it to her hotel. She led it to a well-lit police station parking lot. She pulled in, parked beneath bright lights, and waited. The car slowed, paused, then continued straight past without stopping. She exhaled once, not shaking, not crying. She called Denise. "He's watching," Laura said simply. Denise's voice sharpened slightly. "Do you want a restraining order?" Laura stared at the station entrance, the steady flow of people coming and going. "Not yet," she said, "but document it." "We will," Denise replied. "If it happens again, we escalate." Laura drove back to her hotel with the calm of someone who understood the difference between fear and caution. She wasn't afraid of him physically. She was wary of his desperation. Desperation made people unpredictable, especially when they felt their control slipping. By the end of that month, the situation had settled into a new shape. He couldn't reach her directly. He couldn't rewrite facts. The hospital stood behind her procedure. The legal boundaries stood between them. And somewhere in the recovery ward, Claire was learning her own truth without Laura's interference. The consequences were surfacing exactly as they should, not through spectacle, but through reality. Laura moved into her apartment on a rainy Saturday, choosing a small place 15 minutes. 4. From the hospital. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't meant to be. It was clean, quiet, and entirely hers. The first thing she noticed was the sound. No shared footsteps, no television murmuring from another room, no familiar sigh from the couch when someone sank into it after work. The quiet was honest. It didn't pretend. She unpacked slowly, placing plates in cupboards, folding towels, arranging her books on a shelf. She didn't decorate aggressively. She didn't try to prove she was thriving. She simply built order. At night, she ate a simple meal standing by the counter, then sat on the floor with her back against the wall, letting the room feel real around her. The loneliness came in waves, not because she missed betrayal, but because she missed the version of her life she had believed in. On Monday, she returned to work and requested a stable schedule for a few weeks. Not fewer hours, just predictable ones. Marisol arranged it without questions. Laura used the structure like a rail. She woke early, exercised lightly, prepared meals, and arrived at the hospital with her mind already quieted by routine. One afternoon, a younger resident named Priya walked beside her after rounds. Priya had always been eager, always slightly anxious, the kind of person who wanted approval badly enough to lose sleep over it. She glanced at Laura and said cautiously, "Dr. Bennett, can I ask you something?" Laura looked at her. "If it's about technique or clinical judgment, yes." Priya swallowed. "It's not exactly." Laura paused near a window overlooking the courtyard. "Then you don't need to ask," she said gently, not unkind. "And I don't need to answer." Priya flushed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "I know," Laura said. "You meant concern. Keep that. Just learn where it belongs." Priya nodded, humbled but grateful. And the moment ended without awkwardness. Laura had always taught with firmness. Now she taught boundaries, too. Healing didn't happen in a montage. It happened in small, almost boring choices. Laura bought groceries and planned meals instead of eating whatever was easiest. She stopped scrolling her phone at night. She began running again, not for punishment, not to prove strength, but because movement helped her body release what her mind tried to hold. She learned the neighborhood bakery clerk's name. She nodded at the same elderly man walking his dog each morning. Simple human. Contact without intimacy, enough to remind her she was still part of life. Sometimes when exhaustion hit, grief tried to take advantage of it. She'd come home after a long surgery, wash her hands, and stare at the empty couch as if she expected someone to be there. The old reflex would rise, the urge to tell him about a difficult case, to share a small joke, to ask what he wanted for dinner. Then memory would correct itself. There was no him to talk to, not the man she thought she had. Not anymore. On those nights, she didn't call friends to vent. She didn't drown the feeling in noise. She made tea, sat at her small table, and wrote. Not dramatic journaling, just factual sentences about what she felt, what triggered it, what she needed. Some entries were only 3 lines, but they anchored her. They reminded her that she could witness her own experience without collapsing under it. Denise kept the legal communication clean and contained. Laura rarely had to read it. When she did, she noticed the shift in tone over time. His messages moved from denial to bargaining to controlled resignation. He requested meetings. He requested explanations. He requested closure. Denise refused anything emotional. She offered only legal process. Laura accepted that. Closure wasn't a conversation with someone who had lied. Closure was the life she was building. One day, Laura received a plain envelope in her mailbox with no return address. She didn't open it inside her apartment. She set it on the counter, washed her hands, and stared at it for a full minute, listening to her own breathing. Then she called Denise, who advised her to photograph it before opening. Laura followed instructions. Inside was a short handwritten note from her husband. It wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic in a meaningful way, either. It was the kind of message people wrote when they wanted to sound sincere without naming what they had done. He said he missed her. He said he hoped she was safe. He said he would always care. Laura folded the note and placed it in a folder for documentation. She didn't respond. Caring wasn't a sentence. Caring was action, consistency, honesty. He had offered none when it mattered most. As weeks passed, something softened in Laura, not her standards, but the constant tension of shock. She started noticing colors again. The warm yellow of sunrise as she drove to work. The green of a tree outside her bedroom window. The clean smell of laundry folded fresh. She laughed once at a resident's dry joke and realized she hadn't laughed in longer than she could remember. The sound startled her, then comforted her. One evening, she cooked pasta while music played quietly, not to fill the silence, but to make the apartment feel lived in. She ate at the table and looked around at her small space. Her own plates, her own schedule, her own peace. The betrayal still existed in her history, but it was no longer pressing on her chest every moment. It had become a fact, not a cage. Before bed, she stood by the window and watched rain begin to fall again, soft against the street lights. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt steady. Healing, she realized, wasn't a dramatic breakthrough. It was waking up each day and choosing a life that didn't require you to shrink. She turned off the lights, got into bed, and slept without waiting for anyone to come home. Laura didn't announce her new life. She simply lived it, and people began to feel the difference in her without knowing the reason. The first sign wasn't something dramatic. It was the way she walked into the hospital each morning as if she owned her breath again. She wasn't rushing with that tight, strained urgency she used to carry. She still moved fast when she needed to. But now her speed came from purpose, not from trying to outrun a heaviness she couldn't name. During a morning case conference, Dr. Adler, the senior attending who rarely praised anyone, asked Laura for her opinion on a complicated patient transfer. Several surgeons offered suggestions, their voices layered with competing confidence. Laura listened quietly, then spoke with the clean, direct clarity that made her respected. We stabilize first, then we move. If we rush the transfer for convenience, we increase risk. The patient doesn't care about our schedule. The body doesn't negotiate. There was a brief pause, the kind that happens when the simplest answer is also the strongest. Dr. Adler nodded once. Agreed, he said, and moved on. After the meeting, Priya caught up with her in the corridor, nearly jogging to match her pace. Dr. Bennett, she said, I used to think being calm meant you weren't feeling anything. But I'm starting to understand. It's something you practice. Laura glanced at her, not unkind. Calm isn't the absence of feeling, she said. It's deciding what you'll do, even when you feel everything. Priya swallowed as if the words landed somewhere deeper than professional advice. How do you do that? Laura slowed slightly at the elevator doors. You choose one principle, she said. One. Then you keep returning to it. Mine is, I don't let chaos choose my behavior. Priya nodded slowly. The elevator arrived. Laura stepped in and the conversation ended there, not because Laura didn't care, but because she understood the power of leaving a lesson without wrapping it in comfort. Some things needed space to settle. Later that week, Marisol approached her near the nurse's station holding a clipboard. We've got a new surgical tech starting, she said. She's nervous. She asked who she should watch if she wants to learn composure. I told her you. Laura's first instinct was to deflect. Praise made her uneasy. It always had. But she recognized something in Marisol's tone, something honest, not flattering. That's generous, Laura said. It's accurate, Marisol replied. She lowered her voice. People notice when someone doesn't turn their pain into a performance. It gives everybody else permission to breathe. Laura didn't answer immediately. She had never seen her personal explanations. He requested closure. Denise refused anything emotional. She offered only legal process. Laura accepted that. Closure wasn't a conversation with someone who had lied. Closure was the life she was building. One day, Laura received a plain envelope in her mailbox with no return address. She didn't open it inside her apartment. She set it on the counter, washed her hands, and stared at it for a full minute, listening to her own breathing. Then she called Denise, who advised her to photograph it before opening. Laura followed instructions. Inside was a short handwritten note from her husband. It wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic in a meaningful way, either. It was the kind of message people wrote when they wanted to sound sincere without naming what they had done. He said he missed her. He said he hoped she was safe. He said he would always care. Laura folded the note and placed it in a folder for documentation. She didn't respond. Caring wasn't a sentence. Caring was action, consistency, honesty. He had offered none when it mattered most. As weeks passed, something softened in Laura, not her standards, but the constant tension of shock. She started noticing colors again. The warm yellow of sunrise as she drove to work. The green of a tree outside her bedroom window. The clean smell of laundry folded fresh. She laughed once at a resident's dry joke and realized she hadn't laughed in longer than she could remember. The sound startled her, then comforted her. One evening, she cooked pasta while music played quietly, not to fill the silence, but to make the apartment feel lived in. She ate at the table and looked around at her small space. Her own plates, her own schedule, her own peace. The betrayal still existed in her history, but it was no longer pressing on her chest every moment. It had become a fact, not a cage. Before bed, she stood by the window and watched rain begin to fall again, soft against the streetlights. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt steady. Healing, she realized, wasn't a dramatic breakthrough. It was waking up each day and choosing a life that didn't require you to shrink. She turned off the lights, got into bed, and slept without waiting for anyone to come home. Laura didn't announce her new life. She simply lived it, and people began to feel the difference in her without knowing the reason. The first sign wasn't something dramatic. It was the way she walked into the hospital each morning as if she owned her breath again. She wasn't rushing with that tight, strained urgency she used to carry. She still moved fast when she needed to. But now her speed came from purpose, not from trying to outrun a heaviness she couldn't name. During a morning case conference, Dr. Adler, the senior attending who rarely praised anyone, asked Laura for her opinion on a complicated patient transfer. Several surgeons offered suggestions, their voices layered with competing confidence. Laura listened quietly, then spoke with the clean, direct clarity that made her respected. We stabilize first, then we move. If we rush the transfer for convenience, we increase risk. The patient doesn't care about our schedule. The body doesn't negotiate. There was a brief pause, the kind that happens when the simplest answer is also the strongest. Dr. Adler nodded once. Agreed, he said, and moved on. After the meeting, Priya caught up with her in the corridor, nearly jogging to match her pace. Dr. Bennett, she said, I used to think being calm meant you weren't feeling anything. But I'm starting to understand. It's something you practice. Laura glanced at her, not unkind. Calm isn't the absence of feeling, she said. It's deciding what you'll do, even when you feel everything. Priya swallowed as if the words landed somewhere deeper than professional advice. How do you do that? Laura slowed slightly at the elevator doors. You choose one principle, she said. One. Then you keep returning to it. Mine is, I don't let chaos choose my behavior. Priya nodded slowly. The elevator arrived. Laura stepped in and the conversation ended there, not because Laura didn't care, but because she understood the power of leaving a lesson without wrapping it in comfort. Some things needed space to settle. Later that week, Marisol approached her near the nurse's station holding a clipboard. "We've got a new surgical tech starting," she said. "She's nervous. She asked who she should watch if she wants to learn composure. I told her you." Laura's first instinct was to deflect. Praise made her uneasy. It always had. But she recognized something in Marisol's tone, something honest, not flattering. "That's generous," Laura said. "It's accurate," Marisol replied. She lowered her voice. "People notice when someone doesn't turn their pain into a performance. It gives everybody else permission to breathe." Laura didn't answer immediately. She had never seen her personal categories. Denise called one afternoon with an update. "He agreed to the terms we proposed," she said. "No contest, no public dispute. He wants to keep it quiet." Laura was sitting at her small kitchen table, a journal open beside her. "Of course he does," she said. Denise didn't laugh, but her voice held understanding. "It's in your favor," she said. "It protects you, too." Laura nodded even though Denise couldn't see. "I'm fine with quiet," Laura replied. "I just want it finished." After she hung up, Laura stared at her tea for a moment. There had been a time when she would have wanted an apology shaped in the right words, delivered with the right tone. Now she understood something that felt almost embarrassing in its simplicity. No apology could return the person she had been before she knew. What she wanted wasn't an emotional scene. What she wanted was freedom from a narrative that required her to keep compromising her own intuition. One evening, Dr. Keene asked, "Do you ever imagine confronting him?" Laura considered it. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but the version I imagine isn't me screaming. It's me asking one question and watching him struggle to answer honestly." "And what's the question?" Laura's eyes narrowed slightly as she focused. "When did you decide I was someone you could lie to and still come home to?" Dr. Keene let the silence hold. "And if he answered?" "I don't know," Laura said. "But I don't need the answer to move on." That distinction had become her anchor. Need versus curiosity. Curiosity could exist without controlling her. Need was what trapped people. Laura had spent too long needing the truth from someone who benefited from hiding it. At the hospital, Laura's life continued to expand quietly. She joined a quality improvement committee, not because she wanted distraction, but because she cared about systems that protected both patients and staff. During one meeting, a junior administrator suggested a shortcut in documentation to reduce burden. Laura pushed back calmly. "Shortcuts don't reduce burden," she said. "They transfer burden, usually onto the patient and eventually onto us." A few colleagues exchanged glances, recognizing her firm clarity. After the meeting, Dr. Morris caught up with her. "You always speak like you're not afraid of being unpopular," he said. Laura shrugged slightly. "I'm not interested in being liked," she replied. "I'm interested in being correct." Dr. Morris smiled. "That's why people respect you," he said. Laura didn't correct him. Respect wasn't her goal, but she accepted it as a consequence of living honestly. One weekend, she visited her sister Renee for the first time since leaving her marriage. Renee lived 2 hours away and had 2 children who treated Laura like a celebrity whenever she visited. The kids ran into her arms, tugging her toward the living room. Renee watched from the doorway, eyes searching Laura's face. Later, after the children fell asleep, Renee brought out 2 mugs of tea and sat beside Laura on the couch. "You never told me everything," Renee said softly. Laura held her mug, warmth against her palms. "I didn't want to make it your burden," she said. Renee's eyes sharpened with affection and frustration. "That's what you always do," she said. "You handle things like a surgeon, even when you're not in an operating room." Laura looked down. "It's how I survive." Renee leaned closer. "You don't have to survive with everyone," she said. "You can let someone hold the edge with you." Laura swallowed, her throat tightened slightly, not with tears, but with something deeper. Recognition. "I didn't want pity," Laura said. Renee shook her head. "This isn't pity," she said firmly. "It's family. Tell me what you want, not what you can handle alone." Laura exhaled, And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to speak without cleaning the story into neat facts. She told Renee about seeing the name on the file, about the moment her body froze, about walking out of the operating room with her face composed while her mind cracked quietly. She told her about the envelope, the ring, the silence. Renee listened without interrupting, tears pooling in her eyes, fists clenched with anger on Laura's behalf. When Laura finished, Renee whispered, "I want to drive to his house and destroy his car." Laura let out a small, surprised laugh. It wasn't joy. It was the release of hearing someone else feel what she had refused to perform. "Please don't," Laura said. Renee wiped her eyes. "I won't," she said, voice rough. "But I need you to know that what you did wasn't cold. It was brave." Laura stared at the dark window. "It didn't feel brave," she admitted. "It felt necessary." "That's what bravery feels like," Renee replied. "It's not fireworks. It's choosing yourself even when it hurts." On her drive home, Laura thought about that word, brave. She had always associated bravery with dramatic rescue, with heroic decisions under pressure. But she was beginning to see a different form, quiet self-respect, the refusal to beg for honesty, the courage to build a life without needing someone else's permission to feel safe. At a stoplight, her phone buzzed with a message from Denise. "Final paperwork is ready for signature next week. You're almost done." Laura read it, then placed the phone face down. She wasn't celebrating yet. She wanted completion with the same calm dignity that had carried her through everything. In therapy, she began to address the smallest wounds too, the subtle ways betrayal had tried to alter how she saw herself. Dr. Keene asked, "Do you ever blame yourself?" Laura's answer was immediate. "For trusting." Dr. Keene nodded. Laura thought carefully. "I blame myself for ignoring what I sensed," she said. "Not because I caused his choices, but because I stayed longer than my instincts begged me to. I kept explaining away things that didn't deserve explanations." "And what do you feel when you say that?" Dr. Keene asked. Laura paused. "Sad," she admitted. "For the version of me who believed love meant enduring confusion." Dr. Keene's voice softened. "And what would you tell her now?" Laura's eyes lifted. "I'd tell her that love doesn't require you to disappear to keep the peace," she said. "I'd tell her that if someone's honesty depends on your silence, it's not honesty." That sentence stayed with Laura long after the session ended. It became something she carried into her work, her family, her friendships. It changed how she spoke, how she listened, how she allowed people into her life. Looking back without regret didn't mean pretending it hadn't hurt. It meant refusing to let hurt rewrite her standards. It meant acknowledging the pain and still choosing a future not defined by it. And on a quiet Sunday morning, she realized she could remember the operating room without her chest tightening. She could remember the shock without needing to escape it. The memory had become a chapter, not a prison. The day Laura signed the final documents was ordinary in every visible way. The sky was pale, the air crisp. She wore a simple coat and walked into Denise's office with a folder tucked under her arm like she was arriving for any routine meeting. Denise greeted her with a warm nod and a steady smile. "This is it," Denise said, sliding the papers across the desk. "Once you sign, it's official." Laura sat down, uncapped the pen, and scanned each page with careful attention. Denise watched her, not impatient, understanding that Laura's calm was not avoidance. It was respect for reality. When Laura reached the last line, she paused briefly, not because she was uncertain, but because she recognized the weight of what she was closing. She signed, then set the pen down. Denise exhaled softly. "How do you feel?" Laura considered the question honestly. "Not relieved," she said. "Not devastated." Denise waited. "Finished," Laura said finally. Denise nodded as if that was the most accurate answer. "Finished is powerful," she replied. "Many people never get to finished. They stay stuck in almost." Laura stood, adjusted her coat, and accepted the copy Denise offered. As she walked out, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt steady, like a door had closed quietly behind her without slamming. On the way back to the hospital, she stopped for coffee and sat by the window. People moved along the sidewalk, talking, laughing, rushing, checking phones, living lives full of unseen stories. Laura watched them with a softened gaze. She wasn't suspicious of everyone. She wasn't hardened. She simply understood now that many lives contain secrets, and that secrets do damage even when they are wrapped in polite routines. At work, her day unfolded like any other. She performed a consult, reassured a worried family, and corrected a resident's technique with patient instruction. But in the afternoon, something happened that revealed the real transformation. A woman in her 40s came into Laura's office for a post-surgical follow-up. She looked well-dressed and composed, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I need to ask you something," the woman said, voice tight. "You don't have to answer if it's inappropriate." Laura's eyes held steady. "Ask." The woman swallowed. "How do you know when it's time to leave something that's hurting you?" Laura didn't ask for details. She didn't push. She only studied the woman's face and recognized the particular strain of someone trying to look normal while carrying a private collapse. Laura chose her words carefully, not as a therapist, not as a savior, but as someone who had learned. "You know," Laura said quietly, "when the amount of effort it takes to stay starts costing you your dignity." The woman's eyes filled instantly. She looked down, embarrassed by her own reaction. Laura handed her a tissue without comment. "I thought I needed proof," the woman whispered. "I thought if I could just confirm it, then I'd be allowed to leave." Laura's voice stayed soft, but firm. "You don't need permission to protect yourself," she said. "You need honesty with yourself. That's the only permission that matters." The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't apologize for being human," Laura replied. After the woman left, Laura sat back and felt a quiet ache in her chest. Not for herself this time, but for how many people walked around believing they had to earn the right to choose peace. She understood, perhaps for the first time, that her unthinkable decision had not only saved her, it had given her a language to offer others. That evening, Laura went home to her apartment and cooked dinner slowly. She didn't eat. 7. Standing up anymore. She set the table even when she was alone. It wasn't loneliness. It was respect for her own life. As she ate, she thought about what unthinkable had meant at the beginning of her story. How her mind in shock had assumed unthinkable must involve anger, exposure, collapse, destruction. But the unthinkable had turned out to be something else entirely, the refusal to participate in her own erasure. A week later, she received one final message through Denise from her ex-husband. It wasn't long. It didn't contain excuses. It simply said he was sorry that he had made choices he couldn't undo and that he wished her well. Denise forwarded it with a note, "No response required." Laura read the message once, then closed it. She didn't feel satisfaction. She didn't feel revenge. She felt distance. The apology arrived too late to change anything, but it arrived early enough to confirm what she already knew. People often recognized your value only after they lost access to it. On Saturday, Laura visited Renee again. They cooked together, laughing as Renee complained about a burnt sauce, and Laura teased her for refusing to follow a recipe. The children climbed into Laura's lap and begged her to tell a story. Laura made one up about a brave doctor who could fix broken bones, but had to learn how to fix her own heart. The kids listened wide-eyed, then fell asleep halfway through, their trust effortless. Later, Renee sat beside her with a serious face. "I'm proud of you," Renee said. Laura shook her head slightly. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she replied. Renee leaned in. "Yes, you did," she said. "You ended something without becoming ugly. You kept your values. You didn't let betrayal turn you into a different person." Laura stared at the quiet living room, the children's toys scattered on the floor, the warmth of family around her. "I was scared," she admitted. Renee nodded. "Of course you were." Laura's voice lowered. "I was scared that if I stayed, I'd disappear. And I was scared that if I left, I'd be alone." "And what did you learn?" Renee asked. Laura breathed in slowly. "That being alone is sometimes the first honest place you can rebuild," she said, "and that disappearing is worse than solitude." When Laura returned home that night, she stood at her apartment door for a moment before going in. The hallway smelled faintly of someone's dinner. A neighbor's laughter drifted through a wall. Life was close, present, ordinary. Laura unlocked her door, stepped inside, and turned on the light. She walked to the bedroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She didn't see a victim. She didn't see a woman defined by betrayal. She saw a woman who had chosen discipline over spectacle, ethics over impulse, and dignity over fear. The real meaning of Unthinkable wasn't what people expected when they heard the headline of her life. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't public humiliation. It wasn't a revenge plot. It was the quiet decision to walk away without asking to be understood. It was the choice to protect a patient even when her personal world cracked open. It was the refusal to let someone else's dishonesty drag her into chaos. It was building a new life one steady day at a time until peace became normal again. And on that final night when she turned off the light and lay down, Laura felt something she hadn't felt in a long time without forcing it. Calm. Not the calm of numbness, but the calm of freedom. She had kept her values. She had kept her mind. She had kept herself. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, give it a like and share it so others can learn from it, too. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one.